Have you ever found yourself standing at a crossroads, torn between two choices, unsure which direction to take? Perhaps the weight of a decision kept you awake at night, your mind spinning with thoughts and doubts. Conflict, whether external or internal, is an inevitable part of life. But here's a question. What if conflict didn't have to control you? What if you could uncover a way to navigate it with clarity and peace? Conflict isn't just about arguments or disagreements with others. It's something we all face within ourselves, between our desires, fears, and perceptions. And yet, there's a way to rise above this turmoil, a way to understand its root cause and liberate ourselves from its grip. In today's session, we're going to embark on a journey of exploration, a journey into the nature of conflict, the role our thoughts play in creating it, and how understanding these elements can lead to true liberation. Together, we'll examine the patterns of thought that fuel conflict, and we'll discover practical steps to break free from these cycles. By the end, you'll not only gain deeper insight into your own mind, but also learn how to embrace a life of awareness, balance, and inner freedom. Conflict can be categorized into two broad types: external and internal. External conflict is the kind we're all familiar with. Arguments, disagreements, and struggles that involve other people or our environment. Perhaps you've had a disagreement with a colleague over a project, or maybe you've faced a challenging decision about your career or a relationship. These external conflicts are often obvious, tangible, and can sometimes feel overwhelming. But then, there's the internal conflict. Those silent, invisible struggles that take place within our minds. These are the thoughts and emotions that pull us in different directions, creating friction in our own hearts and minds. Think about the times you felt torn between pursuing a dream and staying in your comfort zone, or when your heart says one thing, but your mind whispers another. Internal conflict can often be more challenging to navigate because it's less visible and more complicated to resolve. Now, let's explore some common examples. On a personal level, we often face conflicts about career decisions. Should we take the job that promises stability, or should we risk everything to follow our passion? Similarly, in relationships, we might find ourselves at odds with our desires and the expectations of those around us, especially when it comes to choosing a partner, getting married, or making life-changing decisions. On a social level, conflict often arises due to family expectations or societal pressures. Maybe your family has a clear vision of what your life should look like, but that doesn't align with your own dreams. Or you feel the weight of societal standards pushing you in one direction, while your own values pull you in another. The key insight here is that most conflict doesn't come from external circumstances alone. The majority of it originates within us, the way we think, perceive, and react to situations. Our thoughts can create division where there is none, shaping our experiences in ways that fuel unnecessary tension and stress. It's not the situations themselves, but how we interpret and react to them that gives rise to conflict. When we begin to understand this, we realize that the root of the conflict is not out there in the world, but within us. It's our thoughts and our perception of the world around us that create these divides. And by changing how we see things, we can transform how we experience life and its challenges. Our thoughts shape everything we experience. They're like the lens through which we view the world. But here's the catch. Thoughts aren't always reliable. They're often fragmented, reactive, and not always in tune with the reality around us. The way we think, whether consciously or unconsciously, plays a huge role in the conflicts we face, both with ourselves and others. Thought is an integral part of our human experience, but it's far from perfect. Thoughts aren't always clear or focused. In fact, they're often fragmented, disconnected pieces of information that pop into our minds randomly. They come and go, without a consistent structure, and they tend to be reactive, triggered by external events or our internal state. This fragmentation creates confusion and tension in our minds, which leads to conflict. Now, let's explore how these fragmented thoughts influence our perception and behaviors. Our thoughts have a powerful role in shaping our perceptions and biases. Have you ever found yourself making snap judgments about a person or situation based on fleeting thoughts? It's as if our minds have already decided something before we've fully understood the situation. For example, you might meet someone new and think, they seem nice. But within moments, doubt creeps in. What if they're pretending? What if they're not as genuine as they seem? These fleeting thoughts don't reflect reality, but because they're fragmented, they lead us to jump to conclusions. This is how thoughts shape our biases and perceptions, creating unnecessary conflicts in the process. Imagine you're at work and you get an email from a colleague. The message seems neutral, but as you read it over and over, your mind starts to question their tone. Did they mean it sarcastically? Are they upset with me? You find yourself analyzing every word, letting your thoughts spiral into doubt. The more you think about it, the more conflicted you feel about the email, about your colleague, and even about your own actions. This is what happens when our thoughts are fragmented. They start to build upon each other, creating an emotional response that may have no real basis. In reality, your colleague probably sent the email with no ill intention, but your mind filled in the gaps. And this internal conflict, born from fragmented thoughts, can sometimes spill over into how we interact with others or make decisions. So, how do we address this? The key lies in observing our thoughts, simply becoming aware of them. By becoming conscious of the fragmented nature of our thoughts, we can prevent them from spiraling into conflict. Awareness allows us to step back and see our thoughts for what they are, just thoughts, not reality. And once we can separate ourselves from the chaos of these thoughts, we start to realize that we're not defined by them. Now, let's dive deeper into the concept of awareness and how it can help us transform the way we experience conflict. Because once we observe our thoughts, we begin to understand how to shift our perspective and free ourselves from unnecessary battles. We all experience the inner chaos of our minds, those constant, fragmented thoughts that seem to drive us. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by this mental noise, especially when it leads to conflict in our relationships, decisions, and overall well-being. But what if the key to transforming conflict lies in something simple yet profound? What if the power to break free from this mental chaos resides in awareness? Today, we're going to explore how awareness can be a game changer in reducing conflict and creating more peace in our lives. Awareness is the first step in recognizing the chaos within our minds. The moment we become aware of our thoughts, we can step back and observe them instead of being swept away by them. It's like shining a light on the turbulence inside. Suddenly, we're no longer controlled by the storm. We're able to watch it from a distance, understanding that it's just a passing phase. When we're not aware, it's easy to get caught in the whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. We don't realize how much influence they have on our actions and decisions. But once we bring awareness to our mind, we begin to see things more clearly. This clarity gives us the power to choose how we respond, rather than being pushed around by every passing thought. Let's explore a few practical techniques that can help us develop this awareness. The first is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being present in the moment, noticing your thoughts, and observing them without judgment. It's about paying attention to your inner dialogue, especially during moments of stress or conflict. You can start by setting aside just a few minutes each day for mindfulness. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and tune into your thoughts. Notice how they come and go, without attaching meaning to them. This simple practice helps you realize that thoughts are just fleeting, and you don't have to react to them. Another helpful technique is journaling. Taking a moment each day to write down your thoughts can be incredibly insightful. As you write, you'll begin to recognize patterns in your thinking, identify sources of conflict, and see how often you react to situations without truly understanding them. Journaling gives you a safe space to express your thoughts and feelings. And by rereading your entries, you'll start to notice how often your thoughts are fragmented or driven by emotion rather than understanding. Another powerful practice is active listening, especially in conversations with others. How often do we listen with the intent to respond rather than to understand? We may hear someone's words, but our minds are already preparing our counter-argument or judgment. This reactive mindset only perpetuates conflict. When we truly listen, without planning our reply or making assumptions, we gain insight into the other person's perspective. Active listening is about being fully present and engaged in the conversation, focusing not just on the words but also on the emotions and intentions behind them. This creates a deeper understanding, reducing misunderstandings and fostering connection. Most conflicts arise because we react without fully understanding the situation. It's easy to fall into the trap of reacting emotionally or defensively. But what if, instead of reacting, we took a step back and tried to understand? What if we asked ourselves, what's really going on here? Understanding requires patience and openness. It means looking beyond surface-level judgments and taking the time to understand the deeper motivations behind our thoughts and the thoughts of others. When we shift from reaction to understanding, we begin to dissolve the conflict. By becoming aware of the mental patterns that fuel our reactions, we can break free from the cycle of conflict. Awareness isn't just about observing, it's about shifting our perspective, allowing us to see situations clearly and respond thoughtfully. Awareness is the foundation of personal growth and conflict resolution. It opens the door to deeper understanding and peace. But there's more we can do to refine this skill and create lasting change. In the next section, we'll discuss how to cultivate a balanced mindset and the power of detaching from our thoughts, leading to greater liberation. Conflict is an inevitable part of relationships, whether personal or professional. It can arise from trust issues, unmet expectations, or simple misunderstandings. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, are you reacting to the person in front of you? Or are you reacting to your own thoughts and assumptions about them? Today, we'll explore how our thoughts shape the dynamics of conflict in relationships and how understanding this can help us resolve conflicts with more clarity and less emotional turmoil. In our personal relationships, conflicts often stem from trust issues, unmet expectations, or misunderstandings. For example, imagine a situation where a partner forgets to do something they promised. You might feel hurt, frustrated, or even angry. But what if instead of simply reacting to their behavior, you took a moment to examine your thoughts about the situation? Maybe you're thinking, they don't care about me. Or, this is another example of them letting me down. These thoughts create emotional turmoil, which can escalate the conflict. The reality is, we often react more to our interpretation of someone's actions than to the actions themselves. These interpretations are shaped by our thoughts, beliefs, and past experiences, which may not even be accurate. Conflict also arises in professional settings, and often it's related to toxic environments, poor communication, or power struggles. Perhaps you've experienced a breakdown in communication during a team project where someone misunderstood your intentions or the direction of the work. On the surface, it may seem like the other person is being difficult or uncooperative. But if you pause and reflect, you might realize that the conflict is fueled by miscommunication and assumptions. Maybe you assumed they understood your expectations, or they assumed you weren't clear enough. Either way, the conflict wasn't necessarily about the people involved, but about how both parties interpreted the situation. This leads us to a key question in resolving conflicts. Are you reacting to the person, or are you reacting to your own thoughts about them? In many cases, the conflict is not as much about the person's actions as it is about how we perceive those actions. Our thoughts create a lens through which we view the world and others. If our thoughts are clouded by judgment, past experiences, or assumptions, we're likely to react based on that distorted perception. But when we bring awareness to our thoughts, we can begin to see things more clearly, without the emotional charge that often fuels conflict. Let's take a closer look at a simple example. Imagine you're having a conversation with a friend and they respond curtly to something you said. You might immediately think, they're angry with me. Or, they don't like what I'm saying. This thought triggers feelings of insecurity or frustration, and you might respond defensively, escalating the situation. But what if instead you paused and asked, "What's really going on here?" Perhaps they were simply distracted or had a long day. Instead of reacting to your thoughts, you could have asked them directly, "Is everything okay?" By clarifying the situation, you avoid unnecessary conflict because you're addressing the reality rather than your assumptions. Conflict in relationships, whether personal or professional, is often the result of how we think about others and their actions. By becoming aware of these thoughts, questioning their accuracy, and focusing on clear communication, we can begin to reduce the tension that leads to conflict. In the next segment, we'll explore how shifting our focus from reactions to understanding can lead to more harmonious interactions and healthier relationships. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the role of perception in conflict resolution. Imagine a moment of intense conflict, perhaps a heated argument, or a situation where others' opinions weigh heavily on you. Now picture yourself staying calm, centered, unaffected by the storm of emotions around you. This state of freedom from mental turmoil is what we call liberation. Liberation isn't about escaping life's challenges, it's about how we respond to them. Today, we'll explore how achieving spiritual freedom can help you rise above conflict and find peace within, no matter what's happening around you. At its core, liberation is the ability to see your thoughts without being controlled by them. It's the awareness that you are not your thoughts, but the observer of them. This realization gives you the power to detach from the constant flow of judgments, fears, and reactions that can create inner turmoil. Think about it. We often allow our thoughts to dictate how we feel and react. We get caught up in fears, worries, and judgments, thinking they're real or necessary. But when we step back and observe these thoughts without identifying with them, we free ourselves from their grip. Let's take a look at some real-life examples of liberation in action. Picture yourself in a heated argument with someone close to you. In the past, you might have gotten swept up in anger or frustration, reacting impulsively, fueling the conflict. But with liberation, you can pause and observe the thoughts and emotions rising within you. Instead of reacting, you choose to remain calm, understanding that the thoughts stirring inside are just passing waves, not your truth. Another example. How often do we fear judgment or criticism from others? Maybe you've hesitated to express your opinions because of what others might think. With liberation, you let go of that fear. You begin to realize that others' opinions don't define your worth or truth. You're free to be yourself, regardless of external judgment. At its deepest level, liberation connects you to your essence, your true nature, beyond the fleeting thoughts of the mind. When you recognize that you are more than your thoughts, you tap into a sense of inner peace and spiritual freedom that transcends the chaos of the mind. This spiritual connection allows you to see the bigger picture of life, understanding that conflicts, challenges, and emotions are all part of the human experience. But you are not defined by them. You are the space in which they arise, and from that space, you have the power to choose your response. Liberation isn't something we attain once and for all. It's a practice, a shift in how we engage with our thoughts and emotions. By learning to observe our thoughts without getting entangled in them, we begin to experience true freedom. This spiritual freedom leads to a deeper connection with ourselves and the world around us. In the next segment, we'll dive into how this liberation can transform your interactions, creating more peaceful and harmonious relationships. Stay tuned as we continue exploring the power of awareness and choice. Now that we've explored the concept of liberation, let's talk about how you can start applying this powerful practice in your everyday life. Liberation is not a distant goal. It's a journey that begins with simple, practical steps. In this segment, We'll break down 3 key steps to help you break free from the grip of your thoughts and embrace a life of peace and clarity. These steps will help you navigate the internal world of the mind, bringing you closer to the freedom we've been discussing. The first step toward liberation is learning to observe your thoughts without judgment. The mind is constantly churning, filled with a mix of ideas, beliefs, fears, and emotions. But we often identify with these thoughts as if they define us. Instead of getting caught up in these mental stories, take a step back. Imagine you're sitting by a river, and your thoughts are like leaves floating downstream. You don't try to control the current, you simply observe it, letting each leaf pass by without clinging to it. By observing your thoughts without labeling them as good or bad, you create space between you and the mind's constant chatter. This space allows you to choose your response rather than reacting automatically. The second step is questioning the ego, your sense of self that is often tied to your thoughts. Ask yourself, who am I beyond my thoughts? We tend to define ourselves by our mental patterns, our successes, failures, and beliefs. But what if none of that truly defines us? When you question the ego, you begin to see that your true essence is not bound by your thoughts or your circumstances. You are the observer of these thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. By exploring this question, you'll start to detach from the labels and judgments the mind tries to impose on you. This deep sense of self-awareness allows you to connect with a more expansive, peaceful sense of being, one that transcends the noise of the mind. The third step is embracing impermanence, the understanding that everything, including your thoughts and conflicts, is temporary. The mind loves to hold on to things, whether it's anger from a past argument or anxiety about a future event. But the truth is, all things change. Think about a storm. At its peak, it may feel overwhelming, but we know it will pass. In the same way, your emotional reactions, your thoughts, and even conflicts in your life will eventually fade. By embracing impermanence, you begin to see conflicts as temporary, something to move through, not something that defines you. Understanding that everything is temporary helps you detach from the urgency of the moment. It allows you to maintain a sense of perspective, knowing that whatever challenges you face today will eventually pass. Let's put these steps into practice with a real-life scenario. Imagine you're facing a difficult challenge at work. A project is falling behind, or there's tension between colleagues. It's easy to get overwhelmed and react impulsively, but instead you can take a step back and observe your thoughts without judgment. Ask yourself, are these thoughts about the situation clouded by fear or frustration? Are you attaching your sense of self-worth to the outcome of this project? By observing your thoughts and detaching from them, you can approach the challenge with a clearer mind, making decisions that are grounded in clarity rather than panic. Now let's look at a family scenario. Maybe there's ongoing tension with a relative, or you're struggling with unmet expectations. Family dynamics can be charged with emotion, and it's easy to react defensively. But if you can observe your thoughts, you'll begin to see that many of your reactions are tied to the ego or past experiences. Questioning your thoughts, asking yourself who you are beyond these reactions, and embracing impermanence can help you approach the situation with more understanding and empathy. By practicing these steps, you can respond to family challenges with more patience and clarity, creating space for healing rather than further conflict. By practicing these 3 steps, observing thoughts without judgment, questioning the ego, and embracing impermanence, you can begin to experience the liberation that leads to greater peace and freedom in your life. As you apply these steps in everyday situations, whether at work or with family, you'll notice that the grip of conflict loosens. You'll become less attached to your thoughts and reactions, allowing you to respond from a place of clarity and peace. In the next segment, we'll explore how these practices can foster deeper connections in your relationships and empower you to live a more harmonious life. Stay with us as we continue this journey toward liberation. As we wrap up today's session, let's take a moment to reflect on the key insights we've explored together. First, we learned that conflict begins within. It's often not the external circumstances, but our thoughts and perceptions that fuel the tension. Second, we saw how our thoughts are fragmented and often deceptive, leading us into cycles of overthinking and self-doubt. And finally, we discovered that liberation lies in awareness and understanding. By observing our thoughts without judgment, questioning the ego, and embracing impermanence, we can begin to break free from the hold of inner conflict. The journey to self-awareness and freedom isn't easy, but every step brings you closer to peace. Remember, each moment of awareness is a victory, and with practice, you'll create a life of greater clarity and inner harmony. I encourage you to start observing your inner dialogue today. Begin by practicing mindfulness, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. Notice your thoughts without attaching to them, and allow space for greater awareness to emerge. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of conflict, thought, and liberation. May you find peace within yourself as you continue your journey toward freedom.